justice language in the midst of all their activities so everyone can participate regardless the language they speak. So if you are comfortable or you would like to listen in Haitian Creole or in Spanish this activity tonight, would kindly ask you to go to the back and see the interpreter at the table and pick up an equipment so you can listen in the language of your choice. So, bonsoir tout le monde. Non pas m'se Loud avec Mob Language Services et à soir, c'est un plaisir pour moi. Pour moi, porter interprétation pour nous dans la langue créole haïtienne. Donc, c'est engagement pas prend lui-même pour mettre justice pour langue dans mettant toute activité qui a réglé. Il y a une façon pour tout le monde qui attend participer dans la langue ou préférée. Donc, si vous avez en créole haïtien, nous avons du temps pour y passer derrière, qu'on interprète qui là, la bon, un petit équipement mettez dans les oreilles et puis attendre en créole haïtien tout ça qui passe dans l'espace là. Donc, pour nous qui attendez et sur live stream, si vous avez en créole, nous avons du temps pour relais dans 305 901 26 92. Donc, on attendez pendant que regarder live en créole haïtien. Merci et puis bonne participation.
Buenas noches a todas y todos. Mi nombre es Vanessa Urbina, soy intérprete con Mob Language Services y hoy vamos a dar interpretación en español y criol haitiano. Entonces, si quieren escuchar este evento, participar en español, en criol haitiano, les pedimos que vayan a Willy, él va a estar allí dando los equipos de interpretación o levanten su mano. También recuerden que vamos a tener este evento en YouTube en vivo. Entonces, las personas que nos están viendo en YouTube nos pueden llamar a la línea 786-665-8802. Esto lo vamos a estar poniendo en la pantalla. Recuerden, la línea es 786-665-8802 y también queremos agradecerles a nuestras compañeras, nuestras colegas que están haciendo interpretación en lenguaje de señas americanas, entonces también por hacer este espacio mucho más inclusivo para todos y todas. Muchas gracias.
Good evening. Welcome to Perez Art Museum, Miami. First, I'd like to apologize for my voice. I'm going to do this to the best of my ability. I'd like to thank you for joining us both here at the museum and those of you watching live on YouTube. My name is Anita Bram, and I'm the Associate Director of Adult and Public Programs, and it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's Scholl Lecture Series featuring artist José Parlá in conversation with architect Craig Dykers of Snohetta. Tonight, we're excited and honored to celebrate the opening of José Parlá Homecoming with this special conversation. Homecoming is Parlá's first solo museum exhibition in his hometown and features a new series of never-before-seen works, a site-specific mural, and a gallery space that mirrors a portion of the artist's studio. Parlá and Dykers will discuss how art and architecture intersect and support each other, as displayed by collaborations between Parlá, Dykers, and Snohetta. Parlá worked with Snohetta to convert a warehouse in Gowanus, Brooklyn, into his working studio in 2014. The design of Parlá's studio is one in a series of collaborations with Snohetta, including the integrated artwork for the facade of the Far Rockaway Public Library in Queens, New York. Parlá's mural, Nature of Language, lives in Snohetta-designed James B. Hunt Jr. Library at North Carolina State University. Immediately following the conversation, I do hope that you will help us continue the celebration with a Roma performance by Clave Cuba and a live set by Arthur Baker on the terrace outside, immediately following. We also have Parlá books, shirts, and a hand-finished print edition of 10 for sale in both the shop downstairs and the pop-up shop at the top of the auditorium. Okay, I'm keeping it brief. And this work does not happen on its own, but with the support and help of many. I would be remiss if I did not make a few acknowledgments before we get started. A very special thank you to Deborah and Dennis Scholl for their ongoing support of this important lecture series and inspiring programs. We appreciate you so. We can clap it up for them. Of course, the exhibition, José Parlá, is organized by my colleagues Maritza M. Lacayo, Associate Curator, with the support of Fabiana A. Sotillo, Curatorial Assistant. Bravo to you both for making this show possible. And this exhibition is presented by Citi with supporting sponsorship from Sarah Arison and Goya Foods. Sincere thanks to all for their support. Last of the thank yous. I'd also like to thank the incredible team of people working to produce our PAM education programs like this one tonight. Major thanks go out to David Miller, Education Coordinator, our world-class AV team, Denise Faxis and Andrew Bird, and of course, Lazaro Yanes and Jose Chosi on the cameras and video. Yeah, we could not do this without you all. Okay, and last, a bit about Jose and Craig before we kick off this conversation. So, José Parlá creates paintings and multidisciplinary works based on his interest in hybrid forms of abstraction. He draws inspiration from various mediums, including music, calligraphy, dance, and the decay of urban architecture and advertisements. His works poetically challenge ideas about language, politics, identity, and how we define places and spaces. Parlá's relationship with mark-making is physical and textural, incorporating the body's gestures into a painterly stream of consciousness composed of areas of addition, erasure, and layering that challenge the status quo of visual culture. Parlá was born to Cuban parents in Miami, Florida, and lives and works out of Brooklyn, New York. He studied painting at Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia, the New World School of Arts in Miami, Florida, and of course, Miami-Dade College, also in Miami, Florida. I could list Jose's incredible list of shows participated in, public art projects, publications, awards, and collections, but instead we'll save the time for Jose to talk through much of that himself. And last, about Craig Dykers. Craig Dykers co-founded Snøhetta in 1989, an integrated architecture, landscape architecture, and design company focused on well-being, biodiversity, sustainability, and empowering the communities where they work. Snøhetta is based in New York City, USA, and Oslo, Norway, and has 5 additional global offices. Dykers has led many prominent projects, including the Alexandria Library in Egypt, the Oslo Opera in Norway, the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the Joslin Museum of Art, and several new libraries, including the Calgary Central Library. Recent projects underway include the Theodore Roosevelt Presidential Library, the Ford Motor Company Design Campus, and the Museum of Natural Science in Guadalajara, Mexico, among many other projects nationally and internationally. Dykers has lectured and taught extensively in Europe, Asia, and the Americas. He has collaborated with numerous artists, and after living in Oslo for 16 years, has lived in Brooklyn, New York since 2005. Please join me in giving it up for Jose and Craig.
Check, check.
There we go.
Okay, here you go.
Yeah.
Do you want to run this for a bit? Yeah, see how it goes. All right, groovy. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. It's a huge honor to be here in Miami, my hometown, at the Perez Art Museum, Miami, with my dear friend, Craig Dykers from Snøhetta, one of the most amazing human beings I've ever met. I want to say thank you to Maritza Lacayo, who is the curator that invited me and produced and curated this exhibition. Thank you so much. To Fabiana Sotillo also, and to the entire team at PAM. All amazing. What a great experience. And thank all of you for being here today.
Well, we have a few pictures here that I think you're going to start with. I think we'll run through a few different ways of seeing our work and then merge together towards the end. So maybe you start with your history.
So what you're looking at here, some of you might be familiar with this photograph. It's, I can't remember, it's probably 1992 or 93. And actually there's a friend of mine here tonight that painted next to me here. And I went the next day to take a photograph laying down on the train track. I was very young, as you can see at that picture. I went by the name of Ease here in Miami, part of an integral culture that I think changed the dynamic structure of cities throughout the earth. This is an artwork, an art form that was born really in the cave paintings, and we'll get into that with an amazing project that Snøhetta's done at Lascaux, France. I always considered that the work that we did on walls is really us being descendants of humanity's first mark makers, paintings on caves, hieroglyphics in the Egyptian walls, and throughout the history of the planet. But what was interesting to me growing up is the awareness that a lot of my friends and I had of us being so young and partaking in creating a language that was entirely underground and run by kids. We were all, under the age of 20, starting at 10 years old, doing this kind of work, communicating with each other. We created a communication network that, in a sense, reminds me a lot of the fungus networks of mycelium, connecting underground and empowering trees to breathe. So it's a community it's an art community that really existed underground in cities throughout the United States and the world. And we're going to go through some slides here that are, well, let me see, how do you,
middle.
Oh, it's the big one in the middle, here we go. We're going to go through some of these slides that will show you some of the inspirations and language of what kind of work we do. I started painting on walls and was always interested not only in what we were painting, but in the surroundings and the places that we were painting in. A lot of times we're in abandoned buildings, in train tracks, on trains themselves, in abandoned tunnels, in kind of neighborhoods that were a bit, neglected and abandoned. Definitely not the places that were more polished. They were the working class and poverty-stricken neighborhoods of Miami and of other cities. And there was a language there that I was interested in exploring through the calligraphy and the abstraction of those walls. This image that you're seeing here is a recent painting, but it's really inspired by when you see walls deteriorating and seeing the layers of the color, the paint, the writing, the deterioration itself, that to me, it sort of displays a psychogeography of a place. It speaks volumes of the passerby, the people that have lived there, continue to go by there. And so that's primarily what I'm interested in, is the foundation of my work connects to walls and language and calligraphy. We're going to an image that connects to a wall that I painted in Cuba in collaboration with my friend JR, who is an artist based in France and New York. And we were invited by the Havana Biennial to produce murals wherever we wanted. And we really had already the concept of working with subjects that were elderly people. If you've ever been to Cuba or even thought about going to Cuba, you'll notice that in Cuba there's no advertising like in other parts of the world. You don't see advertising selling you products like shampoo or shoes, or all you see sometimes is maybe like political slogans, maybe a photograph of Che Guevara or this kind of thing. And we really wanted to pay homage to elderly people who had survived the 65 years since the revolution and experienced the hardships of life there. So what you're seeing is a photograph of a woman, and we did 12 murals, really huge scale. And the public, saw us painting constantly. So one of the things that this reflects what we did here at the museum is that we invited the public to come to the museum. And some of you are here tonight that were here last week to see the inside of the studio, the creative process, which is something that you don't normally see in a museum. In a museum you see a finished work and you have a lot of questions. You never really get to interact with artists. And so here we wanted to create this opportunity to see the work in progress, to connect to the making, to the mixing of paint, to the vibe, to the music. And so this is one of the projects that I've been able to do, amongst others, that really incorporated the public. And with architecture, it's fascinating that, talking with Craig over the years, a lot of times you walk into buildings, museums, or universities, and you don't think that behind the scenes architects are thinking so much of you, how you walk into the space, how you flow into the space, how you think about the space, and how you think about yourself in the space, and how you grow and learn in these spaces. And so architecture and art has always been this component that is, of course, about design, but it's also about the soul of what breathes through the space. And working with Craig has been fascinating because Snøhetta Architecture thinks about the art from the inception of a project. Other architects might think of art a little bit later on, maybe when the building's finished, and tries to fit in art kind of at the last minute. What I've enjoyed about working with Craig and Stonehera is that from the beginning, the artist is part of the inception of a building, which is really unique. Craig can talk about some of these images as well, because I'd like to get his take on some of the things that we're talking about.
You know, when we first met, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but the work has an enormous power because I feel you can see and capture the presence of a human in the work. And many people like to categorize your work as some sort of abstract expressionism because that's a term people know, or some other form of abstraction. But interestingly, and you can look in this picture, to me, there's no way I can call it abstract. I feel your arm, I feel your hand, I feel your body as you make this. And traditionally, figurative art has been looking at other people. So you paint something of another figure, and that's the way you sense the body. In your work, it's your figure that we're looking at, just not a photograph or an image of your face. We're seeing your moves. And I've always felt that was a powerful mention for architecture because, as you say, we have to make places that people move through. So we see these lines, but they're invisible because a person moves through there and then it's gone, it's ephemeral. But you capture them for a moment. That's one of the things I felt with your work. It's intriguing because what year did we meet?
I think we met over 20 years ago.
Yeah, something like 2 decades ago. And we met in a very strange situation. It's a Japanese format lecture series called Pechakucha, which you may have heard of, where many people get together somewhat randomly and you give...
Pechakucha means the sound of conversation. It's actually Japanese slang that when you repeat it, like pechakucha, 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 pechakucha.
Yeah.
It's many sounds of conversation. And it's a lecture series that we met.
Yeah, it was somewhat random. I guess nothing is truly random, but somehow there were about 20, 25 people giving 6-minute talks, one after the other. And I can't remember which one of us was first, but we were somehow ended up side by side. So either you gave first or you gave first. And I think each one of us watched the other's lecture and went, oh man, got to work with this person. You know, it was just immediate. And there are many reasons for that, but we both connected afterwards and we started talking and realized that there was so many connections between us. And one of them was the fact that I had represented this project at the talk, which was mentioned earlier. It's our first project as a company. It's the Alexandria Library in Egypt. And that facade that you're seeing there, that solid stone wall, is 60,000 square feet of hand-carved granite with thousands of years of history of language. It was inspired a bit by the Rosetta Stone, as you see here, a facsimile on the left. But this beauty of language and the beauty of the wall and the beauty of the territory of language and the aesthetic beauty of language was powerful for us. And when we were working on the Alexandria Library, everybody wanted us to make calligraphy that said something. Well, it's got to have a sentence or a word. And we said, no, that takes away from the magic and the power of language, these markings that mean so much to us. And many of them we don't know really what they mean because they're from languages we don't understand, but they still have power. And I think that's where we started to connect, that there was an essence to the wall and to the mark. And then many years later, my company, those over in Oslo, had created a design for the new reconstruction of the caves at Lascaux. And this was a very interesting project, allowing people to have both an immersive experience as well as an educational experience learning about these ancient caves, which are not the oldest in the world, and they're not the most grand, but they somehow have an enormous power. Their beauty is quite special. The arrangement of the caves are very unique, so we recreated a cave so that people could visit it. And I know you had talked about these caves quite a lot, and this project somehow takes us all back to that point in time.
I want to kind of interject for a second there, why this is so significant in the conversation. My brother Ray Parlá, who's here tonight, and myself, we would talk to our father when we were really young, because we felt that in our community, there was always the topic in the 1980s about the work that we did on walls being vandalism. And we strictly looked at it as art. But there was the question of property and private property versus, making a mark on someone's property. But we were very aware that the United States had stolen the land from indigenous people. So we were really hyper aware that property has no significance if it's been stolen, that we felt we had the right to write on anything. And of course, that's a very adolescent thought. We were very young. I don't think I would go now and write on this museum's wall because I think I'd be more respectful.
I think you did already. It's in the gallery.
It's in the gallery. But you know what I mean? Like when you're young and you're like, thinking of, changing the world, and you're thinking that kind of revolutionary thought, you go deep into the history. And I think it was pretty abstract to go at the age of 14 and think of ways to connect the human past. And my brother and I would constantly bring up the Lascaux and Altamira cave paintings because we thought that's the most ancient writing on the wall. And then moving forward, here we are. We are the modern cavemen. We thought about it that way. We even had a logo of a caveman kneeling down with a marker. And, we loved writing on the walls of Miami. And it was a lot of fun. And we didn't make friends with the police department. They didn't like us very much. But you grow up out of it. And there was a very deep focus in making art. And this really helped us to see a grand scheme of, where we belonged in history in a very, adolescent way, in a really abstract way, but also very poetic. And so this is, yeah.
And also these walls are incredibly sophisticated. The way they painted them, how they painted them, the reasons are unknown. We'll never know why. But we do know that they were incredibly sophisticated despite the simplicity of them.
Yeah, I remember my brother saying to me that there was one technique where they would crush pigments, right? And then they would put saliva on the wall, right, by spitting on the wall, and then spray the pigment. And we related that deeply to the spray paint. So there were these ancient technologies with these new technologies, and we found connections by doing research. And of course, you brought that to your art teacher, and they thought, oh, this is crazy. How are you going to make these connections? But it started conversations.
And they were made in the dimmest of light conditions.
Yeah.
Sort of almost the same as spraying on a train at night.
In the middle of the night.
Yeah, using only
Memorize
ambient
your
light.
colors.
Yeah. Well, after we met and we talked a lot and we saw these connections, Jose came to us one day and said he was interested in creating a studio. And, we had been talking quite a lot, off and on, about all kinds of dreams. We had a lot of dreams. But Jose brought the first dream to reality in many ways. It was this little manufacturing building in Gowanus area in Brooklyn. And he said he wanted it to be open to people, that people could easily walk in when it was a sort of tied to a community idea. But he also needed to have it closed off from time to time so that he could work. So there was this kind of open, closed, nuanced relationship with this very simple storefront. I think there's like a bunch of fishmongers next door and strange things happening all around it. It's a very rough little street and went through some very rough times, in fact, over the years. So we made it such that the wall could open up on the outside and you could see in when you wanted it to. But for the most part, it would be closed in daily work. So there was all these moving walls that could shut the space off into its own kind of privacy of meditation and energy, but could also be opened up very easily. This is the closed version, of the most closed it could be, and then you can open it up in different ways depending on what was happening at the time in the studio. So it neither belonged to Jose or to the community nearby. It belonged to both. And people should feel that way. It was an interesting project to work on for many ways because I respected him so much and we got along very well. And of course you're like, oh my God, we can't mess this one up. It's just a small thing, but you want it to be somehow derivative of so many emotions and allow the painter to feel they could kind of express themselves without the power of the architecture overwhelming the work, but also that the artists could have their friends and family come by and feel that they were at home. And we made this little thing above. Well, I just want to get to this one picture coming up. The Nest, we called it. And here, maybe you can talk about that piece.
Yeah, you know, when we were, actually I remember the day that we talked about the studio for the first time. We were having a beer, and I said, I got this space, let's think about designing something. And Craig always carries a pen, and just on a napkin, started drawing. Yeah, he started drawing the design. He said, oh man, Jose, I've always wanted to do an art studio. And I said, well, can we do moving walls? He's like, yeah, we can do moving walls, because of these ideas of like open and closing. So the very first sketches, he just pulled out in front of me. And we started thinking about, you know, some of the ideas, how it could have, you know, the potential to grow into, you know, a type of space that is an art studio, a community art center, that it can partner with, you know, non-for-profit organizations, museums. And we, over the years, were able to create work, you know, large scale, like you see on this wall here was the painting for the World Trade Center, and at the same time have this kind of library research space that you can kind of have as a place to think and step out of the griminess of the painting studio. Over the years, we've had so many amazing meetings there where we play music, we talk about new projects, and so we called it the Nest. In the main space, we called it the Arena, where all the work actually gets made. Underneath it, because this is on a mezzanine, we have all the archive. And it's something that Ray and I thought of its potential future to preserve this collection of photographs, videos, small drawings, you know, just volumes and volumes of work that we collected since we were children. Some of it you could see here in the exhibition in vitrines. And so this was this way to design the studio where it could function as contemporary making space, but also grow into a facility that can exhibit other people, do fundraisers. It could also preserve the art in an archive. And has a full kitchen. We've done amazing projects there where we can collaborate with chefs. We've had Ghetto Gastro do amazing projects there with us. The Brooklyn Academy of Music, No Longer Empty, the Brooklyn Museum. So we've been able to do this, you know, pseudo community center art studio that is both open and private. And it's just really to the great mind of Snow Headers.
There were a lot of people that collaborated on this, but one thing that you were talking about, how much thought goes into these things. That color gray that you see on the wall there, I don't know, it must have taken a year to choose that color gray.
It's crazy. So the color gray, everybody's like, why is your studio all these different shades of gray? And part of my painting studies happened at the Savannah College of Art and Design, and the painting hall, it was called Henry Hall, was painted gray. And I always thought we had one of the main classes there was color theory. And the color theory professor said that gray inspires creativity. So I always fell in love with that idea, and that's where the gray colors come from this experience with gray.
And that picture here, you see the wheel the tray in the middle. I believe that's the same tray that's upstairs in the gallery.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the what you see upstairs is the real thing, including the little rocking chair that's up there. So that's kind of nice to see those two worlds come together. Just to say that, you know, I started my career as an architect wanting to be an artist. And I worked as an artist for a short while before I studied architecture. And meeting Ray and Jose and his friends and many colleagues, some of who are here tonight, just inspired me to push back at where I was. So as an architect, I drew a lot. As you can see, I always have a pen, and that picture on the left is a more traditional architectural drawing. That's actually quite tall. It's about 4 or 5 feet tall, that drawing on the left, made in Rome. But thinking about Jose's work, it pushed me to think more about texture. You can see it's already there in the picture on the left, you know, feeling the wall and feeling this place as a piece of history, but started to dive into it deeper with these kinds of studies on the right. And then, of course, the movement of the hand and calligraphy pushing into art. These were all inspired by looking at José's work and some of his colleagues. So interestingly, it pushed me in this kind of direction. I have to say, as an architect, you always feel embarrassed to say that you're an artist because it's a whole different beast. They're not the same. But it helps. It helps me with my work, and I'm sure when you're working with walls, you're thinking about architecture. So
I do. I think, and I think what really connects us is this yearning to connect with people universally. Craig's buildings are welcome to all. It's always about the people first. It's not about the buildings, actually. It's about the people coming into the buildings. And that's something I learned from conversations with you over all these years. With my painting, it was work that was born in the public, and it had a interlocking letter language that not everyone else could read, but it was there. And I was really interested in looking at the world's calligraphies, Chinese and Arabic and Japanese calligraphy. And although I couldn't read it, I felt very connected to its poetic gesture and its form. And I thought that both of our works really connected to this grand universal language that invites everybody to be a part of it. And that's, I think, the biggest connection between us. That there's a lyricism in the design of the way that Craig and Snøhetta build. It's not your typical building. There's beautiful curves, heights, and slopes. And it's just really welcoming. And I always just fell in love with that. And there's also this, look at this beautiful, simplistic, but powerful work. And painterly.
Yeah, as you can tell, I try to limit myself to blue. But then we worked together again. Another interesting collaboration was José's exhibition in the Bronx. It was a really interesting proposal because, like the work here, José wanted to bring life into the museum, to extend the work beyond the walls of the museum, to make it a place where people could feel they'd just arrive and be there and be with the art as though it was theirs. And I think this was called It's Yours?
It's called It's Yours. At that time, the lobby of the museum was barely used. You would walk in and it kind of had like this very empty feeling, like you didn't have this energy. And so I was working with curator Manon Slom, who's here tonight, and we went to visit the museum often, and we said, let's bring life to the entrance, to the lobby. And together with Craig, we said, look, why don't we think about doing, first we wanted to do a coffee shop and create a collaboration with Ghetto Gastro and bring live food and energy and something that the museum just, sometimes it's not in the scheme of things, and it didn't work out, but we found a way to do the vitrines and artwork in the lobby so that people would come in and have the story right away. And Craig came up with this amazing idea to design these chairs and tables that you could sit at with the vitrines, and that the chairs could move so that you could sit on your own if you wanted to, or put them together so that you could sit in groups and in community. And they could be moved around the museum freely, so it was actually artwork that you could interact with. And that's something that was really beautiful.
I think one of the amazing things was that José agreed to paint some of the pieces of furniture. So some of the benches or little stools you get to sit on a José painting. I mean, how cool is that? These are some details of the stools. One of the ones that José painted in front of a piece at the museum. And this was, I think, actually preceded. This was an earlier project we did.
13.
Yeah, North Carolina, we made a library in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we were talking very much about how we could integrate one of his works with us. So we built this space where this was the target. You see it a long way through a sort of large reading room. And it's red and it's bright. And it just draws your eye to it, which draws people through the library and allows them to see other places. It's been enormously successful. In fact, the university there now brings basketball players to this painting to get them to be enlisted in their school. So what kinds of libraries get basketball players to enroll in a school? This is an interesting...
No, it's amazing. It's in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it's got a huge international community of students. And I kept thinking about actually going back to the Alexandria Library in Egypt in the representation of world languages, ancient and international, and how it connected to everyone and anyone who would visit. So I thought about this kind of landscape or an ocean of waves of language. And I titled the piece, Nature of Language. And it really is meant to feel or be the mixture of all the world's languages in one. And so that you could kind of lose yourself in this kind of, story that comes and gets closer to you. And I remember meeting students from India, Japan, Pakistan, Puerto Rico, all over, all kinds of people coming up to me and saying to me, really randomly, I feel like you're writing about my life. And that was really special because it really resonated the feeling of what I was trying to get.
Yeah, it's great. And unfortunately, this is a movie, but it's wonderful to watch. It's not working on this particular presentation, but moving across this, you feel the power of how the body interacts with a canvas. We're going to conclude with the last project we've done together, which is a library on the outskirts and the outer boroughs of New York City in a little area called Far Rockaway in Queens, New York. You may have heard of it in different ways. I think the Ramones had an album called The Rockaways. And then Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the poet, wrote a beautiful poem called Far Rockaway of the Mind, which was dedicated to those people. It's a very interesting area with a lot of challenges economically. And we began talking about creating an even more exceptional, integrated, powerful, and dynamic collaboration beyond what we had done before. So we talked about making the entire building a collaboration.
Yeah, which is mind-blowing. And Craig could tell you stories I really hope you expand on. He went, he would ride his bike from the city to Far Rockaway, which is like a 2-hour bike ride.
In the heat of the summer. Yeah.
And go and talk to people, interview people, everyone in the streets to learn about what they needed, what they wanted as a library, because the previous library that was there was...
It was a bunker. It was like, you wouldn't even go there if a nuclear bomb was going off. It was just horrifying.
It was horrible, and kids didn't want to go in there. It was not inspiring. And so we learned a lot about what the neighborhood needed and wanted, and now it's like life-changing for that neighborhood. And
this was the first sketch, but we needed to make something that was, I think, 150 feet long and 45 feet high. It's massive.
Massive.
Massive work of art, and you can't work at that scale as an artist, one-to-one.
Well, and
Unless
also
you're
we
doing
want to
Mount
consider...
Rushmore or something.
Yeah, and we wanted to consider work that could sustain the weather because, you're near the sea, you have saline, you have, hurricanes coming through there, like Sandy destroyed that neighborhood. And we needed it to be sustainable. And so Craig and I, we discussed this technique called fritting.
It's a kind of a pattern printed, it's a simplification, but it's sort of printed on glass. So it's like it's permanent. It's not painted, and it is actually transparent. You'll see it in a minute. It looks like a solid or metal wall, but this is actually glass. And when you're inside, you can see out. And when you're outside, you see the work in direct way. It's intense.
The building comes to life with the movement of the sun, both outside and inside, because when there's movement, the building changes colors and shades, and light peeks in, causing these beautiful shadows and patterns inside the building. It's state-of-the-art computers and systems for different modes of learning and meeting. And it's not typical quiet library. You can go in there, and it's more of a community space. And if you want quiet spaces, there's quiet spaces provided. And there's multiple levels with these beautiful ceilings that move light throughout the space with glass inside the space that also changes color. So if you're inside the building, it's constantly changing, and it's vivid, and it's really inspiring. That's a picture from inside looking out. And it's just brilliant. I think it's changed the neighborhood for good.
It's impossible not to go in there and feel energized. And kids like it, and kids are using a library, and they go in there. And, everyone told us when we made this, it's going to get shot at. I mean, this is a neighborhood which had one of the highest crime rates in the city for many years, high death rates. It used to be one of the prizes of New York City. It's before air conditioning was invented. Many people went there from Manhattan to escape the heat. And the local high school had 5 Nobel Prize winners in the 1950s and 60s. But of course it got, I say, disenfranchised. They moved a lot of people who were minority people who weren't given the sort of respect they should have gotten. So everything fell apart. And this was the first thing that came into their community where they said, yeah, we can do something. Nobody has touched it because they feel it's their library and not really our library. So I think we're right at the end. This was the opening day. Everybody came out, and it was just a tremendous amount of energy. And people were so happy to be in a library. It's just remarkable. And I think the work on the exterior that Jose made and the light that we managed and the rooms that we've created inside have brought this unique, I think, relationship to a place that other people can enjoy now for years to come. So very happy with that. I think we're finished now with our talk.
It's also a LEED library as well.
Oh yeah, it's been sustainably designed as much as we could with the city of New York at the time. But yeah, it's a well-considered and sensitive design regarding the environment. And it has places for people to escape if there's a hurricane. You know, as we get them up there in New York too, perhaps not as many as you get here, but they do happen in New York. And people can use it as a safe haven. They have access to people that can help them find work, how to write CVs, how to get a job, all kinds of things like that. It's a very useful component of the community. It's transformed it completely just even before it opened. Actually, it took so long to open it because the city was a little bit slow. And when people found out I was working on it, the architect, they'd be just so angry if I couldn't tell them when it was going to open because they wanted to get inside.
Well, the pandemic also slowed that process down. And it's just now to see the joy of the neighborhood really using the space. We went for the opening and just saw the whole place change completely in one day.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
So I think we finished our so-called formal part of this discussion.
We'd love to talk with you, and if you have any questions.
Yeah, we wanted to
invite you to
keep
talk
a
with us.
conversation a little bit, and hopefully there's some questions that you might want to ask us. We'll probably ask each other questions also. There's something going on back there I see in the middle. You can yell it out and we'll repeat the question. Ah.
And I think it was because of the word you just used, Craig, the safe haven and the familiarity of books and language. So my question for you both is if you can recommend a book and language that you would.
Question is to recommend a book. Oh, I think we both have so many tons of books in our house.
Wow. The first book that came to mind is by Haruki Murakami, Dance, Dance, Dance. I love that book. Highly recommend it.
Nice. There's a very tiny little book called In Praise of Shadows, Japanese author. I don't remember the name. I have to ask Elaine. Elaine, do you remember the author's name? No. It's a tiny little book, and if you get to read it, In Praise of Shadows, and it's about the strength of the complement to light.
Thank you for that question.
Any others? I'm sure there's something. Here we go. One there and then there next.
Okay. If you'd like to wait for a mic, I can run you one.
Okay, we have a special microphone for the audience. It's
Okay. We're recording it, so it helps people along.
Oh, okay. When you guys met, what was the speech that you guys were giving, that 6-minute talk? What was it on?
So when you're invited to speak at Pecha Kucha, you speak about the work that you do, but the format is really interesting. It's 20 slides and 1 minute per slide, and they switch automatically. So you just talk for 20 minutes, but you speak about what's on the slide. And so you're just being yourself up there, and they had the most amazing people speaking. I was the youngest, and I was so blown away by Craig's work, and that he came up to me at the end. It was like, this guy's the coolest guy in the world. He's so nice. He's like, come to my studio tomorrow. I was like, wow. And I went to the studio, and I was blown away because it was like project after project that was just otherworldly. And, you know, I had never met an architect before that was, doing this, historical work. It's work that, will be talked about into history to come, what they're doing. So it's mind-blowing. Yeah.
I think I remember there was a lot to do with the script, and I was also showing the Alexandria Library, so there was that immediate connection. But I was in New York because I was asked to help rebuild the World Trade Center site. And so I've made one of the buildings there with my company. And there was a lot of trauma in that project. It was very traumatic to work on that. And when you hear about the history of the people that are trying to make art in the world that aren't part of museums or there's also a lot of trauma in people's lives. They don't have money, they don't have food, they get arrested, and still we can make things. And so that was inspiring to me too, yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Oh, we have one here, and then.
Really nice meeting you both. Well, I know you. But together, you guys are amazing. Do you have a project coming up soon together so we all can look forward to seeing it?
Great. I wish I could tell you one that I'm trying to get to happen right now, but I've signed so many NDAs that I'll get shot. So unfortunately, I can't tell you, but it has to do with science and technology, and I'm hopeful that we can integrate something together, because I think although this work seems very fluid and very much like intuitive, there's a lot of science behind Jose's thinking, and if you read Ray or Jose's writing, and even the titles of some of these paintings are very scientific. So there's something about that. I haven't quite uncovered it yet, but I know it's in there somewhere. Maybe you want to talk about that?
Well, like Craig said, some of the projects that, they come out, they're years in the secret space. They're under applications, sometimes competitions, and we find out years later, and then even after we find out, the public doesn't know for a while. In terms of my work and my titles and my writing being scientific, well, I just think we're all scientific. We're all, in this space where we take a lot for granted. Not that you do or that I do, but I think in general, there's a lot that's just automatic in our lives. But it's all very magical. It's all really scientific. It's all really difficult to explain. Just today I often have these trips where, it's like almost like an outer body experience because I can't explain things. And a lot of my work is like that. It just comes out and it's bigger than me. I look at my work and I can't believe I've done it or I've made it. There's a lot of conversations that are happening behind the scenes that are never even documented. My brother and I have been talking about work since we were kids. And there's many conversations that have never even been recorded. And so in terms of scientific, there's also something spiritual that can't be explained. So there's this place of living, experiencing life and trauma and healing and listening and learning. And that's what allows me to be who I am and to spread light and feeling and love, but also imperfection and just being human. And I think that's the most scientific explanation I can give.
Yeah. I mean, we live in a world where science is under attack, so we have to make sure we can breathe it into our lives more often. I saw a very nice sign not long ago. It said, "Science is like magic, except it's real." So anyway, yeah.
Oh, sorry, you are next, and we'll get you after. Yeah, please.
You were alluding to geography of the artist,
Oh, yeah.
of the viewer. Could
Yeah.
you elaborate on that? It was such an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was always, since I was a little kid, I was really in love with looking at maps. My dad would get us big atlas books, and I loved, learning about the location of countries and cultures. I loved National Geographic coming up. Right before the internet, you looked at National Geographic, the History Channel. I was really into that. I would say this is not something I'm proud of, but I skipped school most of the time. I never went, I just basically didn't care. But I went to 2 classes. I went to history class and art class. And it was like a mystery. This kid has A's in history and art and zeros in all the other classes. I just didn't show up.
We were both kind of bad boys at the same
We were bad kids, good, bad, in a sense. But geography, I was really interested in. I had this crazy theory when I was a kid, like when I was very little. I would sit in the back of my parents' car, looking out the back seat, looking out the back window, so I could memorize the goings and comings of how I would get to my aunt's and uncle's house or a friend's house by looking at the buildings and memorizing the roads and memorizing names of streets and looking at maps and memorizing streets and names. And it was just a love, like a passion, like how could I one day get there to that country? And I don't know if you remember when the internet started to really come in, there was that Google map where you would look at a city and it would kind of take you there and you could navigate. I would do that often, trying to learn about a city, and then eventually we could travel there and go places. And I incorporate that into my work because I'm constantly trying to connect the universality of art to the visitor. I want people to feel that it's theirs, that the show that I did in the Bronx, It's Yours, was an invitation to people to feel like it belongs to them. The museum is theirs, knowledge is theirs, the art is theirs. We don't own anything in this life. We all depart, and then the art stays for the benefit of sharing. And geographies are important because I want a unified world. I dream of more unity, and that's the interest in geography.
And we both have somewhat interesting family histories, in some ways complex. Jose has obviously relations to Cuba, lived in Puerto Rico, Miami, New York, but also has Eastern Mediterranean heritage from the countries along the eastern coast of, sorry, you're from Lebanon and the Levantine, I think is the word I was looking for. And I'm born in Germany, but my mother's English and my father has Mexican-American heritage, although an American born in New Mexico. And I've lived in a lot of places, so I think we both appreciate our genetic character that pushes us to who we are. And everybody has it, by the way. Anyone in this room will have an equally interesting story.
Thank you, great question.
Yeah. Oh, where's next?
You had a question as well.
First, it's a pleasure to meet both of you, and it's such an honor to be here. I wanted to say that, like you guys said, there's no coincidences, and it's so crazy that I'm here because I'm also an artist, and the reason I am here is because I go to art school, and I'm in business, and I want to do exactly what you guys are doing in my hometown in Homestead, because, like you're saying right now, like the crime rates and things like that you see in places that you think need life. And my question to you, I guess, has to be like, how do you keep going? Because it is so crazy and there's so many obstacles trying to just bring light into dark places. So as a person doing this alone, it's so awesome that you guys like have a collaboration about it. So it's like, how do you keep striving, keep going for it? Because I'm in school right now. I am trying my hardest to bring this space, this place for these people, for these kids. I feel like more than anything, because our generation is lacking so much in education and many things that's going on in this world. And like I said, I think there's no coincidence that I'm here to just hear maybe some knowledge on how to keep pursuing this.
Well, I just got to say, you're not alone, right? Like you have community you might not be aware of. Like I think we both felt like that at one point, and we still sometimes feel that way. The challenges of making art that you want to share never stop. There's always challenges at all the stages, and so there's no way to prepare for the difficulties and the obstacles, but know that there are ways to find collaboration, and it's about connecting to the people that you feel share that same bond and language with you, so that you can grow together. we cannot possibly do things alone. We love collaboration. We urge people to collaborate constantly. This whole project, this whole show, Maritza could tell you, it's like, 100 people in this museum helped this happen. From security guards to the, registrars, to the shipping companies, to the architects. There's so much going on that's behind the scenes. And it's all about those conversations that need to take place. We all had, all those challenges and difficult times. And, personally, growing up in the 80s in Miami, it was a different city, right? Some of my friends who are here that we grew up together, the terrain was violent. We grew up in the years where Miami was the largest cocaine port in the world, or in the United States for sure, and there were shootouts constantly. By the age of 15, I was shot. I survived. There are things that are your personal life and your art life, and how do you combine the two without separating it? There's this professional, but there's this very human aspect of, and I think honesty and being who you are, and that's the life force of people seeing you for who you are, that brings the power of you that's different from someone else. That's the bridge to the next thing, because there's always a next thing. And there's always this, you're an artist because you want to make the world a better place. And I think that's why we're all here, because we all care. And so you're not alone. Search for those people. We're always accessible. So many people here are accessible. When you have a question, reach out.
One thing is to recognize that the world has been through so many difficult times. My father was very poor and born during the Depression, and he wasn't even born in a building. He was born on the side of a hill in the desert. And my mother, who was Jewish, who lived in London, lost over a third of her family in the bombings during the Blitz in World War II. So massive, beyond what I can imagine, hardships. And they made it through. And I remember my mother would say to me, I'm just going to go out dancing. And she did that when the bombs were coming down. I mean, she was walking through all the bombs to go dance. And my father, who had nothing to his name, taught himself about art and learned all about things that were outside of his world because he wanted to live this trauma through something else. And, we think we are in a bad shape, and we are, but people have brought themselves through even worse times. And that can give you hope too, because their strength through history is something we can all take energy from and power from. So never isolate yourself.
Yeah, joy is a form of resistance. And joy also spreads joy. So, you create works in different ways, but from our point of view, that energy is what we want to share. It's based on wanting to live through the hard times. And, you can protest in so many ways. We choose music, we choose art, we choose dance. And tonight, by the way, we're going to dance. We have amazing music for you guys if you want to stay. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more, and I think then that's the perfect segue to the music outside. So we'll do this last question. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I think this is just a beautiful talk, listening to you talk about making and art. And one thing that stuck with me is you speaking about homecoming and the considerations behind creating something that would last in the community, something that could weather hurricanes, something that, I'm just interested in art that ages, especially like being from Miami myself. And, I feel like everyone has that experience of coming home and it looks different. I feel like we always say like Miami's too young of a city for so much change. So I'm interested in art in non-traditional spaces. Like when you were saying like, oh, art on walls, I'm like, that's I want to say that's so smart, but I'm like, yeah, it's art on walls, just like the caveman. I'm like, yeah. I'm just reminded of just how natural that inclination to make and create is, and how it started outside. It started in our community.
Real quick, I'm just going to interject something. I think when those people created those paintings, they were not thinking of those things as walls. I think they connected spiritually with this thing. They were the earth. Yeah, it was much deeper than painting on a wall, in a way.
And maybe we did too. Maybe we did too as young people, right? Like some of my friends that are here in the room, we wrote on walls from the age of 10, and now we're in our 50s, and we instinctually followed each other, grew with each other's style. Sometimes we even fought each other. You know, those relationships grew. But there was a sense of spirituality to what we did, somehow subconsciously. You know, you think about Miami and walls and paintings on walls. A lot of people go to Wynwood to look at this. Well, if you look at Wynwood in the 1980s, there were some of the best painters on walls there in the city of Miami. Groups of artists that were there, that was like the birthplace of Miami's underground art scene, in a sense. And we knew it was important, even though we were being told it didn't belong. But we pushed forward because we had a sense that we belonged, that we were, you know, cast aside, and we still said we belong in society somehow. So it comes from instinct, you know. And in terms of homecoming, we thought about this show together as a form of paying homage to the city of Miami, where I was born, but also to the region. For me, it's also about all of our roots and why we landed here, why we're here. Our parents take decisions to come here long time ago. Why were those decisions taken? You look at the history of how countries changed in Latin America, in Europe, in the continent of Africa, and other places that led people to search for a new place, and this place being Miami. The stories are endless, and the story's not so much about, José Parlá's homecoming. It wasn't about that. It was about me as an instrument thinking about what is home in a time where so many people around the world are losing homes. Also, there's more migration in the world now than ever in history. We're seeing wars again popping up, people losing their homes, you know. And so homecoming is also not just that simple. It's asking questions. What is home? A spiritual home, an actual physical home. There's a lot about the art that is transcending the art. It's just more about the thought. And so I want to pay homage to all of these thoughts and to all of these ideas through this show. Thank you for that question.
On that note, please
Wrap
give
it
it up
up.
one more time for Jose and Craig. We do hope that you'll meet us outside for a Clave Cuba performance and Arthur Baker.